Alrighty, so this week we looked at whether half squats are as good as full squats for maximizing glute development from Body by Science. And the study that they actually reviewed was titled Effects of Squat Training with Different Depths on Low Limb Muscle Volumes. So the background of the study, or in general, was that full squats are safe and a functional exercise, as has been established. And this study in particular looked at the effects of full squats versus half squats and their ability to maximize muscle mass of the glute max. 3 other muscle groups were also assessed in the study: the quadriceps, the hamstrings, and the adductors. An often neglected area that makes up to 25% of the muscle volume in the thigh. I was actually surprised by that percentage. They also mentioned that according to Dr. Brett Contreras' rule of thirds, a third of your glute exercises should be horizontal, so things like hip thrusts, back extensions, kickbacks, etc. Another third should be vertical, so things like squats, lunges, step-ups, and the last third should be lateral/rotary, so things like lateral band walks, band standing abductions, or any kind of abductions, seated hip abductions, etc. This study provided some valuable information on the vertical component of the rule of thirds. So by investigating the effectiveness of full squats versus half squats and their ability to optimize not only glute development, but also the entire upper leg, so quads, hamstrings, and adductors. So their variables were that whether hypertrophy of the glute, hamstring, adductors, and quadriceps took place, and they assessed that via MRI. They also tested for maximal strength, and to confirm squat depth, they actually used the distance that the barbell traveled as a measure also. They found out that both programs resulted into insignificant hypertrophy in the glute maximus, so 7% for the full squat and 2% for the half squat only, though. Still, the 2% still was significant enough to be titled significant. There was also hypertrophy of the adductors, again, better in the full squat and with 6% and 3% for the half squat. But almost similar or same hypertrophy for the quadriceps, so 5% for the full and 4.5 for the half. However, 0 growth for the hamstrings. And when it comes to the maximal strength, I think it totally made sense that the full squat, improved the full squat depth more, or the maximal strength more than the half squat, and vice versa. What you practice, you get better at. You don't really get better at doing a full squat if you never do a full squat and you're training it. To me, that made absolute sense. And they found that the strengths of this study were that it was volume matched in the protocol, that the workouts were supervised. I think that that's huge, actually, and that the barbell path that traveled, or the distance of the barbell path traveling, was measured also. So just making sure that it is actually a full squat and not just only barely touching parallel sort of things. And then when it comes to the limitations, people were still reasonably new to training, and there was also no assessment done of the calorie intake or protein intake. Melissa, before you came on, we already said that we all really liked the way that this research review is made up of, and also that it's super comprehensible, and just the way that it's laid out, and like, here are the facts, and then we have the coaches or some other people's experts' opinions. And yeah, so here we have Lauren Conlon's thoughts, and her thoughts were that in terms of rep range and weight, she thinks that both heavy low rep and lighter and high rep training should be incorporated. And she also thinks that it's about finding the exercises that work best for you. And I personally 100% agree with that, because, like, for instance, I don't really feel my glutes when I'm squatting. Like when I do a hack squat, yes. When I do a regular barbell squat, not so much. When I do a Smith machine squat with my feet further forward, yes, also. But with the feet further back, no. I mostly feel it in my more in my hamstrings or also my lower back. So I do think it's quite personal. Even with all the glute activation work and learning that I have been trying to focus on over the last few years, like the squat is still an exercise for me where I really don't actually feel the glutes all that much.
I
But
have a comment there.
yes,
I remember from the course of Mano that he explained that the fact that you do not feel a muscle during an exercise
doesn't
doesn't
necessarily mean, yeah,
that the
yes.
muscle is not working, because when you squat, your glutes are working.
Of course, but no, I still think that mind muscle connection goes a long way. Like, of course, I think he's 100% right. Obviously, in order to get up, just mechanically, my glutes have to be working.
Exactly.
But I do think when it comes to like feeling the muscle, sorry, that's my no phone time. When it comes to feeling the muscle, that like no bodybuilder is going to deny that that is helpful, that is not helpful for hypertrophy when you feel which muscle is working, I think. So for me personally, it's a nice feeling when you're like trying to focus on a certain body part, like let's say you're doing hip thrusts and you're like, oh yes, I can feel that in my glutes, as opposed to when you're doing squats and later you feel it in your lower back. You know what I mean?
Yeah, what he was saying is that okay, well, that you feel it, but that is right up to a certain point, because if you are doing max effort, if you try to focus into the mind muscle connection, you're not gonna be able to lift it, because you need to focus on just lift the very heavy weight that you have on your back or on your hip. So that when you are using high reps and low volume with and low weight, which is the type of training that usually is used for hypertrophy, then this mind muscle connection,
Exactly.
it's a hint, and that's why they like the pump, and because they feel it, so it's like it's actually doing something. But if you're doing more of a strength training type of thing, you don't really need to focus on mind muscle connection,
No,
because you
of
just
course
need
not.
to think on lift the weight, take it from A to B, and even if you do not feel the muscle and it's not burning, it's still working.
For sure. No, I think you're absolutely right. But yeah, I mean, since the study is like about hypertrophy, I do think like to her point, of course, yes, has heavy low rep and lighter high reps both elicit some sort of hypertrophy. But I think if we're like mostly zoning in on hypertrophy and then feeling whichever muscle, in this case, the glute, I do think that for me personally anyway, it has been kind of helpful focusing on that. I do like that she mentioned also like, hey, adequate rest does play a role here as well. And of course, adequate nutrition also. I did include my thoughts in here also. So yeah, in the sense of, hey, okay, cool, not because she didn't actually even talk about the range of motion all that much. So yes, it is about the range of motion for everybody when it comes to certain muscle development. And I mean, there are so many other studies in regards to lengthened partials and blah, 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 which we can maybe talk about in a minute too. I don't know if you guys have been listening to any podcasts in regards to that, but I definitely think it's an interesting topic. In this study, though, I think it's nice to see, okay, both elicit some sort of adaptation, but with a full range of motion, at least according to this, we're still going to get better results. However, I do think for some people, for instance, like something like a box squat, let's just say, which hypothetically is somewhat of a partial range of motion or more like a half squat potentially. I think sometimes that can be really helpful because then you're like, again, you're probably practicing form and you're potentially getting more of an opportunity to feel that particular muscle, or even like with box step ups also. I wouldn't necessarily say that for everyone the higher is better, even though hypothetically you get more of a stretch across the glute. But for some people, it's like, no, this is too much. Let's start with a shorter range. So yeah, it is very much dependent in my opinion. And yeah, the other one I also just said. So now let's go to Brett's thoughts, which I thought was super interesting when he, I don't know if you guys saw the picture as well, and I think he makes such a good point, like a squat and a squat can look very, very different. Someone with a very narrow stance is gonna use a lot of quads and not so much of their glutes versus a wider stance. Yeah, with the pictures, I think it was really quite nicely visible, I think actually. And where he was saying here, so previous research points about glute involvement, saying that it would be the highest at the neutral hip extension, so at the top of the hip thrust or at the top of the squat, like when you're pushing your or extending your hips. So it was interesting that he mentioned that, because obviously in a regular squat you're not going to get a lot of gains if you're just doing that top half, but for instance with a hip thrust, yes, potentially. And then he also says researchers here also only addressed the knee range of motion, no other points of the form, like the stance, like wide or not, and so on. But yes, what was your guys' thoughts on this review?
I was thinking a lot about the mind muscle connection thing too, for two reasons. One, I think that it's important because it informs the movement, meaning like you're doing the squat. If you're really connected to how you're feeling, you may notice, oh, I'm not engaging my glutes. Maybe I need to shift my stance slightly, or maybe I need to lower the bar on my back a little bit. Like it
That's a
informs
good
your
point with the bar.
form.
Yeah.
And so that when you're doing the movement, you're feeling it in the way that you should. You're not like, gosh, this just hurts my back and nothing else seems to be working. So I think that's a part of it. And then I also think that if you're doing a full squat, and especially if it's your first time doing full squats, you're going to be there. Like you're mentally in the moment and you're experiencing that as you're going up and down. But maybe half squats, maybe you're zoning out. Maybe you're like, oh, I do this all the time. It's easy. I just go halfway and I go back up. So if you're really connected to what the intention of the exercise is, and I do think there's value in mind muscle connection always, but I think that that might bring more intention to engaging the muscles that should be engaged.
Totally. I think in regards to the bar, again, like you said, like if we just look at a low bar powerlifting type of squat, they're gonna get a lot more posterior chain and involvement as well. Not so much of the glute versus that really like Olympic lifter type of high bar squat with a super upright back for sure, and then stance wise also. But yeah, no, that's a really good point overall. Any other thoughts?
My
Sorry.
take would be I think that there would be value in the half squat with women who are pregnant or older adults who we just need to get moving and then progress into full squat. So I'm glad to see that there was some improvement with the half squats. I'd definitely be a proponent of the full squat because it's more conducive to everyday lifestyle and so on and so forth. So that's just my brief take.
Yeah, absolutely. Like things like, hey, if you're falling and you got to get up, or like if you're squatting down to pick something up, you know, a full practicing a full squat, even there is definitely a lot more, or appears a lot more functional anyway.
Yeah.
I did notice that I skipped the slide, so I apologize. Just to look at the training protocol once again to screen that. I really like the setup actually in terms of 3 weeks where they're building up, and again that it was supervised, really really great. And then the last how many weeks? 7 weeks essentially, trying to progress the same weight for the 90%. So it really does sound like it was, you know, they pushed them hard. It was not just like, oh, let's see how we go. But yeah, any thoughts, Mike?
So in the first week of the training program, and did would their proximity to failure be close, do you think? Like
I
when they're
don't
at,
think so. I mean, if they were just doing at about 60%, I don't know how they evaluated the 60%, to be honest. I don't remember. But I mean, if it says that they were doing or seeing to probably with reps and reserve somehow calculating the percentage. But yeah, I don't think so in the first week.
gotcha. Yeah, because yeah, interesting. Sorry, my head goes in lots of different
No,
places.
no, that's cool. But yeah, I was gonna ask you about more like partial range of motion or you know, because I know that you have listened to some of those podcasts and read some of the research in terms of lengthened partials or other things. Is there anything that you really took away from that?
Yeah, and just in case people didn't catch it, but the most recent episode of Revive Stronger was with Milo Wolf, who's obviously he's one of the predominant researchers in the area, and it was definitely quite a well-rounded interview with lots of information. So that was a really good one. But I think one of the biggest takeaways I took from that particular episode was also lengthened partials are probably more likely to be beneficial from exercises that are easiest in the lengthened position but hardest in the shortened position. So if you think of your body parts like back, for example, it gets harder when you're in the shortened position, I think. So it's probably more likely to be beneficial, I think, in the lengthened position, whereas something like a quad exercise, for example, most of the time we're training it in a stretched position anyway, and so it's probably less likely to benefit from more time spent in that position because most of the time is spent in that position anyway, versus say like a back exercise. So I hope that's kind of making sense a little bit.
I think so. I think like on the contrary, like if we look at the hip thrust, it makes sense to spend more time at the top, you know, like getting the person to like hold it at the top for like 2 seconds. I don't think you would ever say like, hey, when you're at the bottom, when you're in a flex position, you know, hold it there for or at least I have never encountered a program. There might be benefits to that, but I think most of the time it's more like, hey, when you're in the vertical position, or sorry, horizontal position, hold it there for 2 seconds and then go back down. Is that kind of like aligning, or like, does that make sense?
So why would you want to spend more time in that position with a hip thrust?
Because I guess as to like Brett Contreras' point if the hip is neutral, that's when you hypothetically get most glute activation.
I can confirm that when Brett programs for you, because he was part of the training with Natalie, he says that you spend 2-3 seconds in the top and you squeeze maximum, and then you go down. Don't drop it, you control it on the way down and then up again. So you stay on the top.
Yeah, like from what I read about his theory and from what he's saying, that the previous research just says where you get the most glute activation for the glute, at least that seems to be his method.
I guess my only question, which I don't know, is activation correlated with hypertrophy?
In that case, yes, because he, I don't remember the paper, but he did MR, so he put some electrodes into his girls, and then he made them lift very heavy and seeing which part they had most activation of the muscle, and that was when they were in the upper part of the hip thrust.
But I guess like again, because if I think about the research on length, so hypertrophy was more associated with the lengthened position. So that for me, that would go in like contrast and
opposite.
contradict that.
Yeah,
Because
you're right. You're right. But for some reason with the glutes, It is the opposite.
I would have to have a look at like in this research review, because he's actually saying previous research said XYZ. So I would be interested also to see what he's referring to. But maybe you can or what, because I haven't listened to this episode yet, but what muscle groups is this guy referring to, like from this study?
So do you mean, sorry, Milo Wolf? Sorry.
Yes, sorry, yes.
So I think so predominantly the research has been done in the calves,
Oh yeah.
primarily, but then they've also looked at triceps, biceps, and they're looking into other body parts, but then they're kind of correlating that to things like the back as well, the lats. Those are the main ones.
Gotcha.
Because again, like things like the chest and the quads, they tend to be quite hard in that stretched position anyway.
Yeah.
So those were the main ones, I think.
Okay. Yeah. Cool. Yeah, interesting, I guess.
It would be interesting to listen to the episode because I did catch a bit, but I can't remember the full context behind it. But I think he was a little bit unsure about how effective the hip thrust exercise is as a glute exercise, which again might kind of contrast Brett Contreras' view. So yeah, it's quite interesting.
Was it Steve who had a debate on of Brett Contreras and someone else? But like there was a really good, like a two-part episode of a debate of two people that like specialize in glute development, and it was Brett and one other guy, and they got pretty heated, but like Brett was quite prepared quite well, and he was quite adamant about the hip thrust.
Yeah, it was Coach Kasim, I think.
Oh yeah, that's right. I think, was that after this study that came out in regards to like saying squats and hip thrusts are equally as effective?
The one of Brett and Menno that we discussed.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that was an interesting debate for sure.
Yeah.
I mean, for Brett, the hip thrusts are his daughter. Like, it's like he created them, he defends them, and he said he was disappointed and he expected hip thrust to do better than squats, but he is able to take it, that they are equal. That's
Yeah.
okay for him, but he was expecting them to be superior.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, it's kind of his baby. When I was in Mexico at one of the gyms, they had 3 or 4 machines of this brand called Booty Builder, and it was like they were amazing. Honestly, you just went in there and it was like, oh, I can feel my glutes so good. It's awesome.
He puts a lot of effort on that, and I follow him and I realize some things that he says that are really important. So the glute machines, the ones that are not designed by him, that I have experienced in several gyms, are built for bodybuilders, males, and we don't fit in there. So it's not in the proportions that a female is usually made. They are too big. So the ones that he designed, he tests in his glute lab with the squat, and he has petite females, big females to test them, and he makes them as much as possible to be able to fit them and to accommodate. And he has like cushions and some adapters so that more female bodies can actually fit in there. So he makes a lot of effort on that.
Yeah, I think even though he can come across quite strong, and some people really don't like him, but I think if you can say one thing about him, he's literally just so passionate about the glute. Like this, it really, like I don't think he does any of this purely for the money, or like in this
No,
debate,
he doesn't charge.
Yeah, exactly. This debate he was saying that for years he didn't charge, and like people just started posting and, hey, you should be charging for this. And yeah, I do really like him. I think he has done some great work and in really popularizing certain things, and also in putting it out that, hey, in some cases using bands and using these things that might look silly to a powerlifter or whatever, it can be really helpful. Like, yeah.
I really like him. And in the training with Natalie, there was a live where he was there, and he's very sweet and he explains very clearly, and he's actually a bit shy.
I believe that. Yeah. Awesome. Well, cool. I guess that was that. And does have anyone else any thoughts on the review?
I guess the finding that I was actually a bit surprised by was the fact that in the full squat group the quadricep muscle growth wasn't as good. I don't know why I was expecting to see it to be more in the full squat group, but then I guess it also depends on what we talked about in terms of technique and things like that maybe. So yeah, that was the one thing that I was like, oh, wasn't expecting
Well,
that.
and to me, like 0 hamstring improvement, that was a little bit surprising also. I mean, like I didn't expect a huge involvement, but like 0 in a group that's like really not that trained overall, just shows that you do have to have some kind of hip hinge movement in there for sure. You can't get away with just lunging, squatting, and step ups and so on.
Definitely.
No, good point. But yeah, to kind of like round it off, I don't know if you guys saw my little homework or if people are starting to get annoyed with my little homework, but I do want to involve the group a bit more. So I just wanted to hear like if there is some kind of supplement that you guys have become curious about or have started taking or have heard more about or want to learn more about, and if we can just kind of go around the room, I'd love that.
I got ashwagandha for Ben, not for me, because I sleep like an angel. Like I don't need anything to sleep. I have problems sleeping too fast, and it's a real issue. I fall asleep in conferences. I fall asleep driving. I fall asleep anywhere.
Well,
I can fall
isn't
asleep.
that called narcolepsia? No, or something like that.
So my family is like this. My mother's family. I'll tell you one thing. My mom was the godmother of a wedding, so she was next to the bride, and she fell asleep on the church.
Yeah, I think it's called narcolepsia or
Okay,
something like
I am like this.
Shit.
So it's
Okay, you don't need ashwagandha.
no. So I got it for Ben. He says he doesn't feel anything, but he's taking it.
Good.
After our research, I thought that it could help him a little bit because he has a lot of problems falling asleep. It can take him 2-3 hours to fall asleep. He's also taking melatonin, but I can't convince him to take it regularly. He just like, today I cannot sleep. Okay, I'm gonna take it.
But I would actually say from what I have learned over recent years, I would advise against taking melatonin regularly. Yeah. Because, well, I mean, also, first of all, almost always the dosages are way too high. I don't know how much he's taking, but most supplements come in like 1 to 5. You can even find 10 milligrams. And it should, like, naturally, our body only needs maybe like half a gram, if that, half a milligram, sorry. So that would be 500 micrograms. If that, so most supplements are way overdosed. And from what I have learned over recent years is if you take it continuously, it doesn't interfere with the natural production, but it interferes with your hormones. So it can mess with like testosterone, estrogen, and stuff like that after a while. So
okay.
no,
he doesn't. He
okay.
doesn't take it regularly. He's just like, okay, today I'm really struggling. So he takes it. He has like a spray and he does like 2 puffs of the spray and he takes the ashwagandha. So those are the supplements for him. And for me at the moment, I'm not taking anything but the T4, which technically is a supplement. Not for me though, because I don't
What
have a
is it?
thyroid.
Sorry?
T4, the
for you.
thyroid hormone.
Okay, you gotcha.
I mean, for me, it's not a supplement. It's just
You
needed
need
for
it.
life, but it's the only thing I'm taking currently. And obviously a multivitamin because I'm vegetarian vegan. So I take a multi that contains, importantly for me, B12 and vitamin D and zinc.
Okay. No omega-3 or anything like that either.
Oh, sorry, forgot it. Yes, omega-3 and the multivitamin.
Creatine.
I'm not taking it at the moment because I used to take it with my protein shake and I haven't had a protein shake, I don't know, in the last 2 weeks or something. So I am not taking it because at the moment fitness is not like up there. It's just like, yeah, I'm going back to it very slowly. And after the holidays, I will start going 2 times to the physiotherapy gym. So I might start taking a protein shake again, and then it's easy to incorporate it in there. Otherwise, it's just like I take it with what?
Sure, makes
I
sense.
have it, it's here at home, and I was used to take it daily, but I stopped it after the surgery. Not because I thought I should do it, just because I stopped taking the protein
Out of
shake.
practicality. Yeah.
Mhm.
Okay. Well, thank you for sharing. What about anybody else?
I just out of like an interesting note, I'm finding it interesting to hear that actually creatine monohydrate's having a lot of health benefits as well, particularly with regard to cognition. And I think like, oh, that's actually quite cool.
It is, and I think there is more and more research coming out about that, like especially also in elderly or even in teenagers, or when it comes to recovery from what is it called? TBI? No, yeah, no, concussion or like
Concussion, yeah.
yeah,
We're
definitely.
going to be getting our grandmas having creatine more than us.
Yeah, I mean, I
Yeah.
don't think it helps like fight Alzheimer's or dementia, but it seems to have like preventative effects for cognitive decline. So yeah, that's a good one.
I recommended it to my dad, and my dad is almost he's 70, so
Awesome.
see if he starts taking it. I have one that I don't know what it's a peptide. It's BPC 157. And it's good for anti-inflammatory, wound healing, improve digestive health. I don't know when and if it'll ever be available. I think it's probably been around for quite a while. It's just one of those ones that's just been kind of brought more to the front of
Is
things.
that something that people are getting like injected in Mexico and like like in Colombia or wherever? Not that I'm thinking about taking it, but like curious because
Yeah.
you always hear on various podcasts about these peptides. I didn't know about this one in particular.
Yeah, this is the one I've heard of other peptides too, but this is the one that kind of stood out especially in regards to back pain, chronic back pain, joint pain, that sort of stuff. So that's where it kind of piqued my interest. Obviously, I have not tried taking it. I believe it's an injection. But yeah, that's just been when you brought that up, I was like, oh, I remember hearing this, so I had to look it up. And so yeah,
Well, I
that's
think
what
the whole research around peptides, I mean, it's gonna keep growing, and I think the matter is mostly about like when is it being legalized, because so many people that are in like the longevity, we want to live for, well, not forever, but to 100, like especially when listening to Peter Attia or so, he talks a lot about like peptides and stuff, and I'm quite interested in those in general also, and I think there's potential there.
I think
well, and I'm
Brian
hopeful, and
Johnson.
also just like the quality. Hopefully, they have like regulations on the quality. It takes time, but yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
I just thought that Brian Johnson got injected with some of them in some island in the Caribbean. He flew there to have it injected because they had a quality control that was
For
enough
what
for him.
reason did he take it?
Brian, to get even younger, if possible.
Okay.
Do you follow him?
No.
Google him after this. It's interesting.
Is he like, oh, I wanna, is this the guy who like drank his son's blood or something like that to get younger?
That's what they said in the newspaper. It's not true. It's not exactly like that. He got a plasma transfusion
Oh, okay.
from his own son, but what the newspaper got is that he drank the blood of his own son. And they did a plasma transfusion from his son to him and from him to his father. And his father actually got much better from cardiovascular things. He's a very interesting person. He's extremely evidence-based, extreme, and read about it. He's very interesting. And he is aging backwards, and he can prove it.
Wow. Yeah, I think I only read like a headline, something about like I'm 17 years.
Yeah, so the newspaper got, it's like, yeah, he's a vampire. And also because he doesn't take any sun, because sun damages your skin.
Yes.
He's very pale. So they call him the vampire. Therefore.
Interesting. Okay, I'll have to look him up. Brian Johnson.
Yep.
Sounds good. Allison, anything you thought of?
Yeah, nothing that disturbing. I haven't been drinking any blood or anything. I have been researching supplements for my knee situation and for helping alleviate inflammation and arthritis and all the things that are going on in there. And there are tons of things. Obviously, there's like SAMe and MSM and turmeric or, curcumin. Ginger, like so many different things. And the one that looks the most promising to me is either glucosamine or chondroitin. Often they're in the same supplement. Both kind of have the same benefit. They don't like compound. If you take both, you don't get double the benefit. It's like take one or the other, you'll probably get the most effect that way. My watch is talking to me. And then, so I'm trying that right now. I'm taking glucosamine. I took it years ago and I'm trying it again. And just in the interest of not complicating things, I'm just taking that one thing for a period of time to see how that goes. I've also recently read about something called boswellia, which is also called frankincense, which sounds very biblical. I had never heard of that as a supplement before, and evidence shows that it may be beneficial. There's limited research on that. So I think that's something I would like to look into a little bit more. But right now I'm just sticking with glucosamine to see how that goes first.
Interesting. Yeah. I mean, I've heard about glucosamine, never tried it or never, read much about it, but the other ones I have not heard about. So yeah, please keep us posted if you do try any of them.
Yeah, we'll do.
Awesome.
Is that from a perspective of inflammation, Alison, to reduce the inflammation?
Yes, and also to help promote healing. So I know cartilage doesn't get blood flow, and it's not like I'm going to cure that problem, the chondral loss. But if there is any possibility of healing injuries to the cartilage or anything going on in there, I'm going to do all that I can while I'm waiting to see the orthopedic doctor.
Mm-hmm.
So that's my thought there.
Cool.
My mom, on a side note, sorry, Mike.
It's okay. It's fine.
As I say, with the glucosamine, my mom had actually had hip surgery last Saturday, and she has been taking glucosamine for years. And she said when she stopped taking it, then she really felt the effects. So she benefited from continually taking glucosamine. So hopefully that offers some sort of bright light for you. Just a little side note.
Thank you.
And I was only going to say as well that it depends where in the meniscus, but you do have a vascular zone and an avascular zone. So there again, it kind of depends on the tear and stuff. But if it's like quite a small one and it happens to be in the lucky area of the vascular zone, then sometimes you can get a little bit of healing sometimes.
Yeah, it's a complex tear. It's in the medial meniscus in the horn and in the body of the meniscus. So I suspect those are not in the vascular zone.
No.
Yeah. Sadly.
Never mind.
Well, thanks for sharing, guys. Yeah, I've just become more and more interested in both myoinositol and berberine, so more for like blood sugar regulation reasons, but also, I mean, like the more I read about it, the more it actually seems to be benefiting for all sorts of reasons, whether that's PCOS or other fertility issues, but also like I think in general, someone doesn't have to be insulin resistant or pre-diabetic or anything like that in order to benefit. Not necessarily so much berberine, but myoinositol more than anything. Berberine probably more on the side of insulin resistance. Like if it's a bit more advanced, as they call it, the poor man's metformin. So I have never tried that, but I have been trying myoinositol, and I do feel like it's helping also. Not that I've ever had like a really disturbed appetite, but I started taking it months ago for the egg freezing thingy, and since then I feel like in between meals I'm more satiated, and then when it comes to, I don't know, I just feel like it's helpful for me for appetite regulation, and I've been reading more about it, so I find it sounds quite interesting anyway. I don't know if anyone has. I think Laura, you have had experience with myoinositol. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's been a while since I've taken it, but I was taking it at night to help with sleep.
Okay, interesting.
Yeah, so I would actually I would try it again. I have, like I said, I haven't taken it for a while, but I would try it again, take it in the morning and see if there would be any different effects from it.
Yeah, I've never even heard about it benefiting sleep, so I've been really just taking it in the morning. Someone else, like from other things that you read, it's like, hey, with every meal or before every meal, you know, if it's mostly for appetite regulation. But yeah, certainly something interesting to read more about, I think.
I've heard Huberman talk about myo-inositol for sleep. I mean, take or leave what you feel about Huberman in his current situation and drama, whatever. But I tried it for that reason too, and I felt like it gave me horrible insomnia, so it didn't work.
Interesting. Various different experiences.
Alison, you always react the other way.
I know, in everything. That's just sort of my standard way of things. That's why I don't take a lot of things.
Oh, that's so funny.
What is the drama with the Huberman Lab podcast? I used to love it. I just don't have time to hear a 3-hour episode. But...
he, like, for his personal life, apparently he was like this really obnoxious person in some of his relationships in the past, and apparently also that he makes a crap ton of money with, you know, AG1 and all this, which doesn't surprise me. Like, you know, God in the world, all these big people are promoting freaking LMNT and AG1, and there's gonna be something about that, in my opinion. But yeah, I mean, that shouldn't have an effect on how much people like his podcast or take what he's saying in sense of research. But of course, everything always gets blurred, right? So
I didn't know.
Yeah.
He's criticized for how he interprets some of the studies. He
that's
kind of
true.
takes liberties to expand the results to mean more than they do. And he also, you know, they're angry at him for having 6 girlfriends at once or whatever, but that's really none of our business.
Exactly.
Happy people.
Go Huberman, if that's what you need to do. Congrats.
Did they know that they were all together? Because in that case, I don't mind.
No.
Okay, in that case, I do.
Well, awesome, guys. This was a fun round. I really enjoyed it. I hope you have a nice rest of your day or afternoon or evening. Melissa, sorry, one last point.
I am not sure about next week because if everything goes fine, we will be in Italy in a camping place. So I'm not sure if I'll have connection. If I am, I'll be there.
Okay.
If I don't,
thank you for the heads up. I hope your journey happens tomorrow.
Yeah, let you know.
Bye.
Bye.